German U-boat commanders once ruled the Atlantic, until they realized America was building ships faster than they could sink them. Liberty ships in days. Mass production that outpaced every torpedo, witnessed the moment the tide of World War II turned beneath the waves. The Atlantic Ocean, 1941. Dark, cold, and vast, it was the stage of one of World War II's most dangerous campaigns. German U-boats prowled beneath the waves, unseen predators hunting Allied shipping convoys that carried the lifeblood of Britain's war effort. For Admiral Karl Dönitz, commander of Germany's submarine fleet, success was measured in tonnage sunk, a simple calculation of destruction that could starve Britain into surrender. At first, the U-boats seemed unstoppable. Wolf packs of submarines struck with precision, sinking merchant ships faster than they could be replaced. Each torpedo that found its mark was a victory. Each convoy lost was a blow to Allied morale. But beneath the apparent success, a quiet storm was brewing in the shipyards of America, an industrial revolution that would change the rules of naval warfare forever. Across the ocean, Henry Kaiser's shipyards were churning out Liberty ships at a pace that defied imagination. Wooden templates replaced laborious plans, prefabricated sections snapped together like a giant puzzle, and a ship that once took months to build could now be launched in mere days. By the end of 1941, the U-boat's kill rate began to look smaller against the mounting tide of American production. As commanders like Werner Henke, Peter Kramer, and Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock logged their successes in wartime diaries, they began to notice an alarming trend. For every ship sunk, 2 more appeared on the horizon. The psychological toll was immense. The hunters of the Atlantic were becoming participants in a war they could not mathematically win, a war against industrial might itself. By 1942, the grim reality was undeniable. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, striking with deadly efficiency, yet the sheer scale of American production was overwhelming. Liberty ships, cargo vessels that became the backbone of the Allied supply chain, were rolling off the assembly lines at an astonishing rate, 3 ships every 2 days. In total, 2,710 Liberty ships were built between 1941 and 1945, each one a steel defiance against the U-boat menace. The German commanders felt the crushing weight of arithmetic. For every ship they sank, the Americans launched 2 more. Tactical skill and stealth were no longer enough. The U-boats were engaged in a losing battle against raw industrial capacity. Diaries from commanders like Henke, Kramer, and Lehmann-Willenbrock reveal the dawning psychological impact, frustration, disbelief, and the growing awareness that the war in the Atlantic could not be won by submarines alone. The SS Robert E. Peary became the symbol of this unstoppable industrial engine. Built in just 4 days and 15 hours, it was a feat of modern engineering that stunned both the Allies and the Germans. Prefabricated sections, assembly line labor, and meticulous coordination turned months of shipbuilding into days. It wasn't just a ship, it was proof that America's arsenal of democracy could outproduce destruction, turning quantity into strategy. The Battle of the Atlantic had shifted. The U-boats remained deadly, but the tide was turning. The war was no longer merely a contest of tactics and courage. It had become a war of machines, assembly lines, and relentless human ingenuity. Beneath the waves, the German U-boat crews continued their deadly patrols. Brave, skilled, and disciplined, they faced icy waters, relentless Allied escorts, and the constant threat of depth charges. Yet as the war progressed, a new enemy emerged, one they could not attack, sneak past, or outmaneuver: the relentless pace of American industrial power. For commanders like Werner Henke, Peter Kramer, and Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock, each patrol became a confrontation with the impossible. Diaries and first-hand accounts reveal the growing frustration. Entire convoys could disappear into the ocean, only to be replaced by 3 new ships launched before the next patrol even began. The U-boat war had transformed from tactical skill to a mathematical equation they were destined to lose. The human cost was staggering. Nearly 75% of U-boat crews never returned home. Submariners faced long patrols in cramped, dangerous conditions, haunted by the knowledge that their efforts were being swallowed by an industrial machine they could not match. For many, courage was not enough. Survival depended on luck, timing, and the hope that the relentless tide of Liberty ships would slow, even as every ship launched reinforced the inevitability of defeat. The psychological strain was profound. Men who once viewed the Atlantic as a battlefield now saw it as a conveyor belt of steel, each ship a reminder that the balance of power had shifted. The U-boat war, once the pride of Nazi Germany, had become a testament to the overwhelming might of American industry, and the realization sank deep. The Atlantic was no longer theirs to command. By 1943, the grim arithmetic of the Atlantic War could no longer be ignored. Admiral Karl Dönitz, mastermind of Germany's U-boat campaign, faced a stark truth. No matter how skillful his submarines or brave his crews, the scale of American shipbuilding was insurmountable. Liberty ships continued to pour into the Atlantic, a relentless wave of steel that defied torpedoes and wolfpack tactics alike. In response, Dönitz attempted to adapt. He shifted U-boat operations, deploying submarines in new patterns, experimenting with night attacks, and targeting supply lines farther from shore. Technological innovations, such as snorkels, acoustic torpedoes, and improved communications, were introduced in a desperate effort to regain the upper hand. But for every tactic devised, America's industrial machine countered with a faster, larger output of vessels. The contrast between strategy and production became undeniable. German intelligence noted that the U.S. could replace lost tonnage 3 times faster than the U-boats could destroy it. Even the most daring attacks, the most carefully orchestrated ambushes, could not stem the tide. The war in the Atlantic had shifted decisively from skill and stealth to industrial capacity, a battle Germany could not win. By the end of 1943, the U-boat threat, once feared across the Atlantic, had begun to diminish. Convoys grew stronger, escort tactics improved, and anti-submarine technology advanced. The realization was clear. The fate of the Atlantic was no longer decided by submarines alone, but by the factories, shipyards, and workers thousands of miles away in America. The U-boat war had reached a turning point, and the arsenal of democracy was winning. By 1944, the Battle of the Atlantic had become a war of numbers, not just skill. German U-boats remained a threat, but the pace of American production had become unstoppable. Liberty ships, once laboriously crafted over months, were now launched in days. The SS Robert E. Peary, famously built in just 4 days and 15 hours, became a symbol of America's industrial ingenuity, a vessel faster to the water than the submarines could sink it. Henry Kaiser's shipyards epitomized this transformation. Prefabricated sections, assembly line labor, and precise coordination enabled the production of more than 5,000 ships during the war. Each vessel represented more than steel and engines. It was a strategic weapon, a lifeline to the Allies, and a crushing countermeasure against the U-boat threat. For German commanders, the psychological weight was immense. Despite courage, training, and innovation, they faced a war they could not win. Diaries and war logs recount the frustration, the disbelief, and the dawning realization that the Atlantic was no longer theirs. Nearly 75% of U-boat crews would never return home, confronting the stark human cost of a conflict now dictated by industrial might. The turning point was absolute. Naval warfare was no longer determined solely by tactical brilliance or battlefield heroics. It had become a contest of factories and assembly lines, production speed outweighing cunning. America's arsenal of democracy had decisively shifted the balance, proving that in modern warfare, industry could wield power equal to, if not greater than, the sword. By 1945, the German U-boat fleet was a shadow of its former power. Once the terror of the Atlantic, the submarines now faced convoys fortified with new technology, improved sonar, depth charges, escort carriers, and long-range patrol aircraft. Every patrol was more dangerous, every success harder to achieve, and every loss more devastating. The human cost was staggering. Of the thousands who served on U-boats, 75% never returned. Those who survived carried with them the haunting memories of missions that, no matter how brilliantly executed, could never halt the relentless production of the Allies. The war had taught a harsh lesson. Courage, skill, and tactical genius could not overcome the scale of industrial power. America's shipyards had proven decisive. Liberty ships were not merely vessels. They were weapons, tools of strategy that underscored the transformative power of mass production. The U-boat campaign had failed not because of a lack of bravery or intelligence, but because it was up against a new kind of warfare, where factories and assembly lines dictated victory as much as battleships and torpedoes. The Battle of the Atlantic had ended, but its lessons endured. Modern warfare was no longer solely about heroics at sea. It was about industrial capacity, logistical mastery, and the ability to sustain an endless flow of resources. The arsenal of democracy had changed the rules of engagement forever, proving that in the industrial age, victory belonged not just to the strongest or the smartest, but to the fastest and most productive. Beyond the statistics and strategies were the men who served on Germany's U-boats, ordinary humans confronting extraordinary danger. Diaries and memoirs of commanders like Werner Henke, Peter Kramer, and Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock reveal the fear, camaraderie, and relentless pressure that defined life beneath the waves. Each patrol was a fight for survival, a test of nerve, skill, and endurance in the claustrophobic, ice-cold confines of a submarine. For many, the Atlantic was a battlefield of contradictions, moments of deadly silence interrupted by the thunderous explosions of depth charges, victory shadowed by the constant loss of comrades, and the psychological strain of knowing that their efforts were being undone by America's unmatched industrial output. Letters home speak of longing, isolation, and the fragile hope that somehow they might return to port. These personal stories humanize the broader narrative of the Battle of the Atlantic. While industrial might decide the outcome, courage, loyalty, and sacrifice defined the experience of those who served. The U-boat war was as much a test of human endurance as it was a confrontation of strategy and production, and the voices of the crews serve as a haunting reminder of the cost of war. Even as the tide turned, the bravery of these men remained undeniable. They fought not just against ships and machines, but against the impossible arithmetic of industrialized warfare, leaving behind stories that resonate long after the guns fell silent. The Battle of the Atlantic had come to an end. German U-boats, once feared predators of the sea, were defeated not by superior tactics alone, but by an enemy they could not touch, the unstoppable machinery of American industry. Liberty ships, assembly lines, and the arsenal of democracy had redefined the rules of warfare, proving that production speed and scale could determine the outcome of battles as decisively as courage or cunning. Yet the human story remained profound. The U-boat crews who fought bravely faced unimaginable loss, with 3 out of 4 never returning home. Their diaries, letters, and first-hand accounts reveal the psychological strain of confronting a war where skill could no longer guarantee survival, a war where men became small pieces in a vast equation of industrial might. The Atlantic taught enduring lessons. Modern conflict is as much about factories as it is about fleets, as much about production lines as it is about torpedoes. It is a reminder that human bravery and ingenuity, though essential, must often contend with the scale of industrial power. The war in the Atlantic reshaped naval strategy, industrial logistics, and the very nature of modern warfare, leaving a legacy that reverberates far beyond the ocean waves. Ultimately, the story of the U-boat war is a story of contrasts: heroism against inevitability, courage against arithmetic, and tactical brilliance against the relentless force of human industry. It is a testament to both the indomitable spirit of those who fought and the transformative power of innovation. A turning point in history where machines and men collided on the high seas, shaping the course of World War II forever. The Atlantic Ocean, 1941. Dark, cold, and vast, it was the stage of one of World War II's deadliest campaigns. German U-boats prowled beneath the waves, striking with lethal precision, threatening to cut off Britain from the supplies that kept it alive. Admiral Karl Dönitz measured success in tonnage sunk, believing mastery of stealth and tactics could decide the war. At first, the U-boats seemed unstoppable. Wolf packs destroyed merchant convoys, and every torpedo that hit its mark was a triumph. But across the ocean, something extraordinary was happening. In American shipyards, Henry Kaiser revolutionized shipbuilding. Prefabricated sections and assembly line techniques transformed months of work into mere days. By 1942, Liberty ships, Vessels built for survival and speed were launched faster than U-boats could sink them. The SS Robert E. Peary, built in just 4 days and 15 hours, became a symbol of this unstoppable force. For every ship sunk, 2 more appeared. Diaries from commanders like Werner Henke, Peter Kramer, and Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock reveal the growing frustration and disbelief. The Atlantic had become a war of arithmetic, Germany's elite submariners against the overwhelming power of American industry. By 1943, the tide had turned. Dönitz attempted new tactics, deploying submarines in innovative patterns and improving technology, but nothing could match the relentless output of U.S. shipyards. Nearly 75% of U-boat crews never returned, confronting a war they could not win. The conflict had shifted from skill and courage to logistics, production, and industrial capacity. Beneath the statistics were the human stories. Men endured icy waters, cramped quarters, and constant danger, their bravery measured against machines and factories rather than enemy fleets alone. Their diaries and letters reveal a haunting truth. Heroism could not overcome mass production. By 1945, the Battle of the Atlantic was decided. German U-boats were diminished, Allied convoys were fortified, and America's arsenal of democracy had proven decisive. Ships, factories, and human ingenuity had outpaced the torpedoes of the Reich. The war had shown that in the modern age, victory belongs to those who can combine courage with capacity, skill with scale, and ingenuity with relentless production. The U-boat war remains a story of contrasts. The courage of men against the inevitability of arithmetic, tactical brilliance against industrial might, and the human spirit in the face of an unstoppable machine. It is a testament to both heroism and innovation, a turning point that reshaped naval warfare and changed the course of history forever.